I live in a neighborhood where sunshine dances lazily across manicured lawns, and children's laughter echoes between the houses with picket fences. It's the kind of place where the American dream is measured in square footage and the number of cars that fit in your garage. Each morning, the community stirs to life, a collective hum of well-oiled routines, where every blade of grass knows its exact height and every rose bush its precise bloom. But there's a chill to this suburban paradise, a shadow cast by the watchful eye of the homeowners association, and at its core stands Karen. Her name slides off tongues like a whispered warning. She's the self-appointed queen of order, a guardian of bylaws and regulations, clutching the HOA rulebook like a sacred text. Her gaze sweeps over our homes with the precision of a hawk, always on the lookout for a transgression, however minor. The neighborhood seemed perfectly content with her reign until the day she set her sights on my backyard BBQs. To me, these gatherings were more than just a culinary indulgence. They were a ritual of camaraderie, a communion of charred meats and laughter. The grill's smoky tendrils would rise into the air, mingling with the aroma of freedom and community. Karen's first move was subtle. A letter slipped under my door. It was cloaked in politeness, a delicate veil over the underlying threat. It spoke of smoke disturbances, of the impact on air quality, as if my grill was a factory belching toxins into the neighborhood. I stored the letter away, more amused than alarmed. What was summer without the sizzle of steak and the crackle of burning coals? Then came the visits, her heels clicking against the pavement like a metronome of disapproval. She would stand at the edge of my yard, arms crossed, her eyes tracing the wisps of smoke as if calculating their trajectory. The neighborhood seemed to hold its breath, waiting for my response, expecting a clash of titans. But I had no desire for war. Instead, I chose peace, a gentle reminder of the community we were meant to be. Each time she appeared, I would smile, offer her a plate, an olive branch wrapped in aluminum foil. Her lips would tighten, a refusal pressed into a thin line. But she never turned away. A second too soon. I sensed her curiosity, a flicker of something not quite disdain. Perhaps even Karen, in her fortress of rules, was not immune to the allure of grilled perfection. I began to notice the little things. Her garden, always immaculate, now bore the occasional weed, a whisper of neglect. Her posture, once rigid, softened at the edges, as if my unyielding kindness had worn at the walls she'd built. The neighborhood watched, a silent audience to our unspoken dance. Still, the letters persisted, their language growing sharper. She invoked bylaws with the fervor of a zealot, her ink a weapon against merriment. Yet, each missive was met with the same response, a calm acceptance, a continuation of the BBQs that had become a symbol of quiet rebellion. I could feel the balance shifting, the scales of power tipping ever so slightly. Karen, for all her efforts, was but a force of nature, predictable, relentless. But nature, in its wisdom, embraces change. It was only a matter of time before the harmony I sought would find its way into the hollow spaces of our discord. As surely as the sun sets and rises again, the seeds of change were sown, ready to sprout in the most unexpected of places. And so, with the annual HOA party on the horizon, I found myself preparing not just an event, but a statement, a testament to resilience and community. The stage was set, the actors in place. The next act was ready to begin. The days following the barbecue were a symphony of absurdity, orchestrated by Karen herself. She moved with the precision of a conductor, directing the chaos with her gavel of discontent. Her grievances took form in the most creative of ways. First came the notices. White slips with officious lettering, tucked neatly under wipers, slipped through mail slots, My mailbox, a humble sentinel of everyday correspondences, soon overflowed with her declarations. They were a testament to her creativity. Unauthorized floral arrangements, excessive lawn decor, improper grass height. I imagined her at her kitchen table, surrounded by papers, her pen scratching with a fervor akin to an artist in the throes of inspiration. Each citation was a brush stroke on the canvas of her campaign. My crime? A celebration that dared to breach the invisible boundaries of her comfort. The neighborhood hummed with speculation. Conversations on sidewalks grew hushed as I passed, whispers curling in the air like smoke from a snuffed candle. Gossip, that most insidious of specters, wove its way through the community, painting me as both villain and hero, depending on who held the brush. There were eyes at the windows, curious, judgmental, sympathetic. The air brimmed with the tension of an impending storm, the clouds heavy with the unshed rain of confrontation. Karen's influence, once confined to the sterile confines of HOA meetings, now stretched its tendrils further. She had become a specter herself, haunting our quiet suburb with rules bent in her favor. Yet, amidst this theater of the absurd, I remained unperturbed. I refused to let her turn my life into a melodrama of her making. My resolve became my armor, quiet yet unyielding. I navigated the absurdities with a stoic grace. Each notice met with a silent shake of the head. Each whisper turned into background noise to the rhythm of my life. There's a certain power in understanding the futility of some battles. I knew Karen's bluster for what it was, a tempest in a teacup, all sound and fury. I had long learned that peace sometimes comes clad in the armor of quiet defiance. My lawn, a verdant sanctuary, had become a battleground, but it remained mine. It stood unchanged and unyielding, a testament to resilience, the grass growing ever so slightly beyond her prescribed height, a small rebellion against the tyranny of conformity. In an unexpected twist, the HOA annual party was announced. The location? My lawn. Karen's face, at the next council meeting, flickered with a momentary loss of composure, a crack in the porcelain facade. Her smile, usually so poised, slipped just for a heartbeat. An unspoken challenge hung in the air as thick and tangible as the summer humidity. My lawn would host the very event she had sought to sabotage, an irony so rich it tasted like vindication. The stage was set, the players ready. Karen had escalated, but so had I in my quiet, unflinching way. Let her rules multiply. Let her whispers grow louder. My resolve was a silent, immovable force, a monument to the power of quiet rebellion in the face of absurdity. The sun was a brazen tyrant in a cloudless sky, casting sharp lines of shadow and light across the neighborhood, a perfect day for vengeance wrapped in community spirit. I stood at my window, watching the stillness before the storm. Karen, our self-appointed enforcer of all things dull and gray, had pushed too far. Her attempts to outlaw my backyard barbecues under the guise of maintaining neighborhood purity had flipped a switch within me. She called them a nuisance, a threat to tranquility. But I knew the truth. She feared joy. I spent the week documenting every encounter with Karen since her crusade began. The petty complaints, the passive-aggressive notes left on my door, and her frequent calls to the HOA board. Each page of my notebook was a testimony to her relentless campaign to crush anything that dared to glow brighter than her vision of sterile perfection. But today was different. Today, I held the reins. The HOA's annual gathering was typically a dull affair, saved from oblivion only by the free wine and obligatory small talk. This year, as the newly appointed chair, thanks to Karen's overreach and my quiet rallying, I had the honor of hosting. On my lawn, amidst the scent of charcoal and the crackle of an open grill. The lawn was a patchwork of color and life, tables draped with bright cloths, floral centerpieces swaying gently in the breeze, and the unmistakable aroma of barbecue weaving through it all, a tapestry of subtle rebellion. Neighbors meandered in, drawn by the promise of something more than the usual fare. Laughter bubbled like champagne over the dulcet tones of music that danced on the air, a stark contrast to the usual oppressive silence that pervaded our street. Even the birds seemed intrigued, perched in trees, observing the spectacle with curious eyes. I spotted Karen hovering at the edge of my yard, her lips a thin line of disapproval. She was a blemish on the canvas, her usual armor of judgment now creaking under the weight of a celebration she could neither control nor contain. I moved through the crowd, exchanging smiles and nods, feeling the pulse of the gathering like a gentle hum beneath my skin. My heart swelled with a quiet triumph, a sense of rightness that settled like a warm, comforting weight. As I approached the grill, I caught snippets of chatter, compliments on the spread, the ambiance, the feeling of community rekindled. Karen's protests had been silenced by the obvious joy that filled the space. In a rare moment of direct confrontation, her voice sliced through the air, sharp and brittle. "This is not what this neighborhood stands for." I met her gaze, the weight of her words almost comical against the backdrop of festivity. The irony hung between us, thick and undeniable. I shrugged, letting the gesture speak for itself. Here was the neighborhood, alive, vibrant, thriving despite her efforts to the contrary. The afternoon unfolded like a well-worn story, each new chapter filled with laughter, shared stories, and the sizzle of the grill acting as punctuation. Karen receded, her presence swallowed by the community she had tried so hard to suppress. As the sun dipped low, casting everything in a golden hue, an undeniable truth settled over me. This was not just a victory over Karen, but a reclamation of our right to live with joy. The neighborhood was more than rules and regulations. It was a tapestry of lives intertwined, the threads stronger together than apart. In the end, it was simple. She tried to ban joy, but joy, like the smoke from my barbecue, rose high and unapologetic, declaring its presence with quiet, steadfast determination. The day of the HOA annual party arrived with the kind of crisp, expectant air that only spring can muster. Sunlight spilled across my lawn, casting long shadows that danced among the freshly set tables and chairs, each precisely aligned with military precision. The scent of blooming lilacs mingled with the tang of barbecue smoke, a fragrant rebellion against Karen's previous attempts to snuff out such simple pleasures. I moved among the preparations like a conductor with an orchestra, my motions fluid and purposeful. Each task completed was a note in a symphony of defiance. The grill sizzled with a chorus of marinated meats, their juices hissing and popping in a delectable protest. In the space of a few hours, my yard had transformed into a refuge of community, a place where the fences weren't just boundaries, but rather invitations to gather. Neighbors trickled in, some with hesitation, others with barely contained excitement. Rumors of my audacity had swept through the neighborhood like wildfire, igniting curiosity and a quiet rebellion in their hearts. Karen's shadow loomed over us, a specter of control that many had grown weary of. Yet here on my lawn, her power seemed to wane, eclipsed by the undeniable allure of camaraderie and grilled perfection. I watched them as they arrived, each face a canvas of tentative hope. Their eyes flicked between me and the lavish spread, as if weighing the cost of this act against the promise of community. Slowly, the tension began to melt. Conversations unfurled like banners in a gentle breeze, laughter punctuating the air with bursts of lightness. I could sense Karen's presence before I saw her, the way a sudden chill precedes a storm. She swept in, her lips pursed into a tight line, eyes sharp with disapproval. Her approach was a calculated dance, each step deliberate and measured. She stood at the periphery, surveying the scene with an air of disdain, her authority crumbling under the weight of our defiance. I met her gaze, a silent challenge exchanged. Her composure, a brittle mask, threatened to crack under the pressure of the moment. This was the culmination of her tyrannical reign, threatened by nothing more than a barbecue and the simple act of neighbors breaking bread together. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same gathering she sought to suppress had become the venue for the very event she prized above all, the HOA annual party. It was a delicious twist of fate that I savored with every fiber of my being. Karen's resolve wavered, her eyes flickering uncertainly. Here, she was no longer the queen of the cul-de-sac, but rather a solitary figure, adrift in a sea of unwelcome smiles and reluctant acceptance. As if on cue, the laughter swelled, buoyed by a shared sense of triumph. Plates clinked, filled and refilled as the gathering swirled around Karen, acknowledging her presence but not her authority. Her isolation was palpable, a fortress of her own making crumbling beneath the weight of community spirit. She turned away, her retreat marked by a stiff, reluctant grace. It was a concession, silent but potent, echoing in the space she left behind. I returned to the grill, the fire a comforting companion in this newfound landscape of solidarity. The party thrived, a testament to the power of quiet resistance and the simple joys of life that Karen could never extinguish. The glow of the embers mirrored the warmth spreading through me. An ember of hope, fanned by the winds of change. The morning after the annual HOA party dawned with a crisp clarity, the kind that follows a night of whimsical joy and laughter echoing into the early hours. My lawn still bore the footprints of neighbors who, despite Karen's best efforts, had indulged in the camaraderie and warmth of community right where she had least wanted it. I stood at the window, coffee in hand, surveying the aftermath. A tapestry of tipped-over chairs and forgotten napkins fluttering in the breeze like white flags of victory. Karen had not been present. Her absence was a silent scream of defeat. But that did not mean her presence wasn't felt. Her shadows lingered like a stubborn stain, the kind that resisted the scrubbing of goodwill and neighborly banter. Yet even shadows fade under the relentless light of morning. The weeks leading up to the party had been anything but serene. Her campaign against my harmless barbecues had escalated to a crescendo of clipped emails, each punctuated with the threat of fines and the vague promise of further action. It was a symphony of discontent, orchestrated with the precision of someone who thrived on the illusion of control. But I had my own music to play. Quietly, I had delved into the HOA's bylaws, poring over them with the diligence of an archaeologist unearthing a long-buried truth. What I found was a web of regulations, brittle and faded with age, yet strong enough to entangle the unwary. But within that web, I also discovered a single strand of salvation, a clause obscure and overlooked. The HOA was as bound by its own rules as it sought to bind me, and there, in the dusty corners of legal jargon, lay my ace. Karen's attempts to stifle my barbecues were not only petty, they were, ironically, against the very rules she sought to impose. The bylaws, it turned out, had a stipulation: any communal event, sanctioned by the HOA or not, required a unanimous vote from the board. A vote that had not occurred. Her authority was as hollow as a drum, making noise but lacking substance. I set my plan into motion with a series of letters, each one composed with the cool detachment of a chess player nudging pieces into place. The board had no choice but to heed their own regulations. Karen's demands crumbled like sandcastles against the tide of logic and law. The irony was delicious. The party had been the final checkmate, a celebration of community in the face of divisiveness. Every neighbor who gathered on my lawn had unknowingly contributed to a statement, louder than any protest or petition. The silence of compliance was broken. As the sun climbed higher, casting its warm glow over the remnants of the night, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Not just for outwitting Karen, but for reclaiming a space that was rightfully ours, free from the tyranny of one person's misguided sense of order. In the end, it was not just a victory over petty rules, but a reaffirmation of the simple joys of community, the kind found in gatherings where the air is thick with the scent of grilled meat, laughter, and the shared stories of lives briefly interwoven, a symphony of humanity that no amount of paperwork could silence. The day of the HOA annual party had arrived, and with it came the anticipation of theatrical resolution. I stood by my window, watching the first of the neighborhood's residents make their way to my lawn. They came in droves like the trickling streams that become a river. Festive chatter and laughter floated across the breeze, mingling with the savory aroma of barbecue goodness already sizzling to perfection on the grill. Our lawn, often the stage of quiet rebellion, now transformed into a vibrant theater of community spirit. It was a sight to behold. Tables adorned with checkered cloths dotted the grass like lily pads on a pond. Each one held a bounty of potluck dishes, each plate a contribution from a neighbor who, like me, had grown weary of Karen's relentless crusade against joy. The sun beamed approval, casting warm light over the scene. It was as if the universe itself had chosen sides, blessing the gathering with perfect weather. As I mingled through the crowd, I saw the faces of the neighbors, relaxed, content, liberated. Conversations flowed like wine, unguarded and fluid, as laughter punctuated the air. Karen, the self-appointed sentinel of order, was noticeably absent at first. Her presence lingered in the whispers of those who noticed her absence as a silent respite from the usual chaos she sowed. But then, like a storm cloud on the horizon, she appeared. Her entrance was as theatrical as one might expect. A silhouette framed by the sun, her expression an unreadable mask of indignation and determination. She wove through the crowd, a ship cutting through gentle waves, eyes scanning for infractions, for the cracks in the facade where she could wedge herself. But the fortress of camaraderie was unassailable today. I watched her, a tiger pacing outside a cage of its own making, looking for a way in. Her eyes were a tempest, but I met them with serene calm, a silent duel of wills. The crowd, oblivious to the undercurrents, continued their merriment. And then, the moment of high tension, the air held its breath. Karen approached, her gaze locking onto mine with the force of a hawk diving for prey. Her words, when they finally came, were sharp, intended to pierce the heart of the gathering. But her voice was a whisper against the storm of our collective joy. "This doesn't change anything," she hissed, her words a final gambit, a desperate bid to reassert control. But it did change everything. In that moment, the masks fell, and the community saw her for what she was, a relic of a bygone era, where control was wielded as a weapon rather than a tool for good. The real power lay not in her hands, but in the hands of those who chose unity over division. The crowd, witnessing the exchange, stood by me, a silent testament to the tide that had turned. I nodded, acknowledging her statement, but the irony was palpable. Her reign was over, not with a bang, but with the quiet resolve of a community that had found its voice. She was sidelined, not by force, but by the simple truth that she no longer mattered in the way she once did. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky with hues of gold and crimson, the party reached its zenith. Karen, for all her bluster, faded into the background, a specter of what once was. The community, vibrant and whole, danced in the twilight, reclaiming what was always theirs, the right to live joyfully without fear. In the end, it wasn't about the barbecue or the party. It was about reclaiming our space, our lives, from the clutches of control. We had shown that true power lay not in the hands of one, but in the collective spirit of many. As the evening wore on, a sense of peace settled over the lawn, a gentle reminder that in the quiet strength of unity, we had found our victory.